Hi, I'm Tom Field, Senior Vice President of Editorial with Information Security Media Group. I'm talking today about critical infrastructure protection, and it's my pleasure to be speaking with Prashant Pillai. He's the Director of the Cyber Research Institute at University of Wolverhampton in the UK. Prashant, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me here, Tom.
So I'm coming into this conversation with the premise that governments and enterprises understand the need for critical infrastructure protection, and they've put programs in place to at least pay lip service to it. But my question is, what's being overlooked in terms of critical infrastructure vulnerabilities based on your research?
I think if you really start looking, you're absolutely right that there is work happening in terms of critical infrastructure protection and looking at cyber attacks and attacks on critical infrastructure from the cyber side is being looked at, but not enough. What we're seeing more and more a rise in cyber attacks to, for example, the power grid, the water grid, transport networks and all. And we're seeing that happening because cybersecurity has been really overlooked for a long time. Most of the protection has been about natural calamities and earthquakes and things like that. But now, over the last few years, there's a little bit of work that is being done in terms of protection, in terms of cyber attacks. But a lot still needs to be done. Understanding threats to the infrastructure itself is a very big task, because you're looking at a large-scale network across a country with millions of assets, new assets coming up all the time. You've got smart homes, smart meters, smart devices, PMU systems, for example, in the energy world. Lots of new things coming up, and understanding the security implications of all of this has not really been taken into consideration.
That's a good point. We focus so much on the legacy vulnerabilities.
Exactly.
So industrial controls and operational technology. But what you're saying is that we're introducing new technology that's got vulnerabilities we've not considered as well.
Exactly. So we kind of been hit from both ends. So if you look at a future smart grid system, we'll have more fancy IoT-based systems on smart homes and all of that, where again, IoT security hasn't really been dealt with properly. In the same time, your power network will have the legacy networks and legacy PLC systems, which probably are not very secure as well. So you've got you've been hit from both sides. The new technology maybe is not very secure, and the old technology is not very secure as well. So you end up having a lot of vulnerabilities across a large network. And a network which is spread across such a large area, geographic area, you can't control it. So anybody can actually connect to the network and actually attack.
So we have seen, certainly in the U.S. where I live, small-scale attacks on the power grid. It was alleged recently that there was a water supply issue in Washington, D.C. that may have been an infrastructure breach. You told me that you fear that entities don't have a good sense of what the real threats are. From your research, what are the threats we need to be most mindful of?
I think we've got to look at two different things. One, look at what's happening at the moment and what can happen in the very near future, which is looking at large, attack on a power network, for example, which has a very large impact. So it's not looking at removing power from a small area or a small city or a village or a town.
Well, those have been tests.
Whereas you can now actually do what's called a large-scale coordinated attack, and that's what I think is coming over the horizon, where you're looking at people attacking a network from multiple different places at the same time, which means the response teams don't really know how to respond to it anymore because they get focused to one area, not across multiple areas, and that makes it much harder to really control. And the large-scale coordinated attacks can also take place across different networks at the same time. And what I mean by that is you could attack a power network and a water network and a telephone network at the same time.
Why choose one?
Exactly, because now everything is connected. If you look at most of the countries are now going to smart city programs, trying to have a lot more smart tech in general, societal services, effectively government services, traffic lights and all of that. But of course, what that means is you can now control all of this. And what that means, you can attack the telecoms network, the energy network at the same time if you wanted to, which adds up to the impact, because you can see that you've been attacked, but you can't tell anybody because your phones are not working anymore. So it's looking at those kind of coordinated attacks, which I think is going to come over the horizon. Maybe not now, but we have now a lot of criminal organizations who are now into cyber crime, backed by a lot of nation states, so they have resources. Right. So it's all just about any time you can actually start seeing that kind of thing happening, and that's what a cyber war is all about.
Smart city is not going to look very smart when it gets DDoSed into inactivity.
Exactly, because you can have a big impact. I mean, if you look at the smart traffic light thing, if you just switch on every traffic light onto green in your whole city, you can imagine the chaos that is going to is going to cause. So how do you control some of these things become very important. Who is responsible and who's going to manage it? And one of the key things about infrastructure security or national infrastructures is business continuity, which you can avoid in other areas. So for example, if you're Facebook or Google, you can switch it off and give a sign that we're out of service for maintenance checks or whatever. You can do that with a Powerball. You can't say we're switching off your power for the next 24 hours just because we want to check. So how do you provide that business continuity is very important. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done within the research community and working closely with the industry itself and looking at building new resilient systems and resilient networks. Because let's be honest, we will never be 100% secure. Right. We will always be attacked. So how do you build a system which will still work when it's being under attack is what we need to be looking at.
So as you do your research and look at different geographies, different nations, where do you see encouragement when it comes to infrastructure protection and resiliency?
To be honest, I think, yes, we've tried to look at, for example, we've worked with the US, we've worked in the UK, we've worked on India as well. And the cultures are very different in terms of how they perceive national infrastructure and what they think is a threat and what is not a threat, and the human culture behind in the countries themselves. And every country is very different. In the US, we've seen a lot of work, to be very honest, that is being done, and they're very proactive in terms of looking at power infrastructure and looking at how security can be provided. The UK as well, but for example, developing nations like India and all probably still need to do a little bit more. What you're now seeing is a lot of emphasis by many countries, not just in India, but Brazil, Indonesia, and all. We try to look at a lot of countries now have woken up and realized that if you don't look at this problem now, this could have huge problems.
Is it going to take a major cyber incident? I don't want to be alarmist, but a critical infrastructure September 11th. Is it going to take that to get the world's attention?
I hope not, to be very honest, but it might be, but we have seen changes, and it's happening at least at the grassroots levels. You can see, for example, like here in the summit here and lots of other summits and conferences, infrastructure security has become a key topic, which is being discussed both in the academia world as well as in the industry world, and there's a lot of now cooperation and understanding taking place. I think what the governments need to do is now really wake up and really take heed of all of this and say, okay, what are the regulations required, what are the legal aspects required, who is responsible? Many countries don't have any agencies looking after some of these things, and it's trying to look at that and saying, okay, do we need somebody looking after this carefully? I mean, the US has, the UK has, but many other countries don't. So it's all about learning from each other and sharing that information, being able to learn from what other countries are doing in terms of this area and see how you can actually adopt that.
Prashant, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thanks for having me.
Been talking about critical infrastructure protection. I've been speaking to Prashant Pillai. He's with the University of Wolverhampton in the UK. For Information Security Media Group, I'm Tom Field. Thank you very much.